Hi, welcome to the 2Tokens Summit. My name is Patrick de Laive. I'm here with Alex Bausch. It is 7:30 p.m. Amsterdam time, and wherever you are in the world, welcome. You must be an avid token fan because it's 7:30, so either you should put your kids to bed or you should have a drink with your significant other. Or it is in the US, it is time for work. So thank you so much for joining us at this 2Token Summit. As said, I'm Patrick de Laive. I'm the founder of The Next Web and moderator of this session tonight. So, of course, today I won't be on my own. We have a packed schedule for tonight. I mean, we have guests coming in and out, and of course we have this pandemic going on, so we have to comply to the coronavirus rules. This brings us to certain interesting switches, etc., because we can only be with two people in the studio, and as you can tell, we are far away from each other, at least 1.5 meters. So this evening we'll present all the learnings and the findings on tokenization, token finance, and token taxonomy. This afternoon we had 2 deep dives, very well attended, and there was a high engagement level, and they were held on the token roadmap and tokenization in Europe. All the master classes and this series as well will be available on the 2tokens.org website for you to view later on, both in video and in audio through a podcast. And before we start, I'd like to thank all the partners of the 2Tokens Foundation. There are many partners. Alex will jump into that a bit later on, but thank you so much for making this possible. So we're going to Alex Bausch. Welcome, Alex, to your, basically this, we could say this is your summit. So thank you so much for organizing it. And as the chair of the 2Tokens Foundation, you had a busy year. And how has it been so far? And let's go through the presentation of today.
Well, thank you, Patrick, and thank you for hosting this this evening. This is the closing session of, you're right, of the last year and a half that we've been doing on this journey. First of all, I'd like to extend my thanks to all the partners, all the people that are helping, putting in their time, putting in their money, their materials. This project was initially started by Block Lab, Port of Rotterdam, the Technical University Delft, yes Delft, Innovation Quarter of the province Zuid-Holland, and supported by the European Union and the Ministry of Economic Affairs. But let's not forget all the people that are volunteering, that were in the roundtables, that are bringing forth their knowledge and their experience. We are showing some of the partners here, but that wouldn't do justice to all the other people that have been involved as well. The project initially started as a subsidy project for that we were started from Rotterdam, and basically my background has been in blockchain and crypto, and we were asked, you know, Alex, could you make a roadmap of how people should work with tokens and tokenization? And if you do that, if you want to take on this challenge, be sure not to use the word crypto, Bitcoin, blockchain, or what have you, because, you know, we don't like that. This was May 2019. And then, of course, June 2019, we all remember Facebook. Facebook came with Libra, yeah. Right? And all of a sudden, everybody said, "Whoa, you know, tokenization, token finance, that is the next thing. You know, we need to do something." And so we started first to recognize that there are a lot of people that really are speaking a different language when you talk about token economics. If you look at tokenization, that goes back to the ancient Greeks, right? You could have a small token and use that for payment. But if you talk about tokenization in digital systems, that is, you know, a lot newer. And so we decided, we noticed that people weren't speaking the same language. There weren't any standards. So the first thing we said, all right, let's see what needs to be done to get people on the same page. And
what was that?
Well, first of all, we noticed that there is silos of groups of people. You have the people in legal, regulatory, the lawyers, speak a different language and with different interests than the financiers, the bankers, the exchanges. So those are different silos. Yeah. Then you have the entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs only want to do one thing, is raise money and make profit and get out there and grow, right? So what we did is that we said, let's bring those three silos together and see what are the dilemmas that we are faced with. And at first we thought, let's do small roundtables, have 10 people in the room and find out what those dilemmas are, and from there we'll continue. That was phase one. Well, it turned out that our roundtables, the first one was November 6th, almost a year ago. Every roundtable we had at least 100 people. So we had to do 3 roundtables. We could, if you have a round table, you cannot have 100 people at a round table.
Virtually you can, but in real life that's even hard. But even virtual, that is hard to let everybody speak up their minds and participate, right?
Well, and this was pre-COVID, so at this time we could still have all the people in the room. Yeah. And so we found out what the dilemmas and what the challenges are and what the fears are, right? We are an inclusive movement. It's a public project. So we wanted to make sure that we know what it is that needs to be done to get tokenization on the map and to make sure, and first of all, there's a big need for information. People said, let's share information, let's do best practices. There was a big need for clarity on regulation and law, what can and what cannot be done. There was a big need on business cases, use cases, standards. So after phase one, the 3 roundtables, we basically, and you can read everything has been well written. You can find it on our website, all the findings of these 3 roundtables. But that was a great start. And from there, we went into phase 2 right before Corona hit us. And
what impact did that have?
Well, phase 2, we didn't want this to be an academic exercise. We wanted to have entrepreneurs meet the regulatory people, meet the financiers, meet the academics, and just go hands-on into a project, make your hands dirty. And so we did, and the idea was to have 3 use cases, lock ourselves up in a room for a day and hack it out. But then, of course, in Corona time, you can't lock yourselves up in a room. You have to do everything remote. So we thought that would be a problem, but I have to admit, it was a blessing in disguise, really, because instead of doing 3 workshops, we had 3 working groups where we had teams with 3 team captains. And everybody involved, from legal people, technical people, business people, working on those use cases in the last 4 or 5 months.
So this was a silver lining to the whole pandemic.
Yeah.
So great, cool. And because we also don't have too much time today, so we also have an extra guest that we want to introduce in this section. Maybe you can take that away and introduce Peter.
Yes. So what's very important is that we took on this assignment with a real deliverable. There's a beginning and an end and a deliverable. And one of the deliverables is that we would publish our findings, our results, and our recommendations in white papers and in papers that we then present to government and the people that can do something with it. So in a way, we are an advocacy group. And the best way to do that is with a deep authority in the Netherlands, which is the Dutch Blockchain Coalition. Blockchain is oftentimes used underneath token projects, and the Dutch Blockchain Coalition uses the tokenization track from 2Tokens. So we partner very closely together, and it's my honor to introduce Peter Verkoelen, who is the chairman of.
I'm just getting a word that Peter is not available at the moment, or has technical issues.
Technical issues, okay.
But maybe you can elaborate a little bit on what the Dutch blockchain is and what their role was here.
Yeah, so the Dutch Blockchain Coalition is a coalition of the willing, and they started 3-4 years ago and are focusing on adoption and standards of blockchain in society as a whole. There are different streams. One is on identity security, self-sovereign identity. One is on the human capital agenda. And the members of the Dutch Blockchain Coalition are the government bodies, the universities, the large banks, and tokenization is one of the themes within Dutch Blockchain Coalition that 2Tokens takes care of. So we are tied to the hip, if you will, and the reports that we are publishing, is partly funded by the Ministry of Economic Affairs through the Dutch Blockchain Coalition. And so the executive summaries and the white papers that we're publishing, we are doing in partnership with the Dutch Blockchain Coalition, who also has the ties into the government and internationally.
Yeah, so we're using a lot of words, a lot of organizations here. If you can describe your last year or your last 1.5 years from when 2Tokens started until now, and then kind of like where do you want it to be in 1 year from now? Could you describe that in a few sentences?
Yeah, so from a project that we took on to create clarity on where we go in terms of tokenization, and the token economy is the cement of the digital economy, right? If you want to transfer value in the digital economy using the web or whatever, you are going to need tokens. From a technical perspective, that sounds very easy. But we need people to do this. We need business cases. We need legal regulatory. We need all these types of people coming together. And to do that, we need to not only educate the society, we need to educate professionals, we also need standards. And so the project was supposed to end at the end of 2020, with this summit. But it has been decided with all the partners involved to create a foundation, an independent foundation with an executive board and a supervisory board, which will take care of looking at tokenization projects, experimenting with new use cases, certifying that the token taxonomy for use cases is going right. But most of all, we also want to continue to maintain the token roadmap, which will be published here today. And that token roadmap, at first we thought that was going to be easy. We create a token roadmap, it's going to be interactive, it's going to be a website, and that's the end of it. But there are so many things that change in the world around us. If you look at that legislation, Europe, introduced MiCA, which is, and you're going to talk more about it with my next speaker. That is going to have an effect on everything that we do here. If you have a utility token or a security token, or whether or not we're going to be using central bank digital currency, that's going to have effect. So our roadmap, our interactive roadmap, which is going to be shown by Olivier later on, needs constant adjustment. And so the foundation, the 2Tokens Foundation, one of the missions is to keep that roadmap updated so that any company, any institution or individual who wants to do something with tokens can go to that roadmap and gets guided through the process. And so he knows what to think about.
So you're on for the next few years on this project. You signed up for it. And so that's great to hear. And hopefully we'll get more 2Tokens summits and masterclasses.
And don't forget, here in the Netherlands, 500 years ago, we were the inventors of the public company. You know about that, right?
Yeah.
We invented the first public stock exchange. We invented.
We had the first bubble as well.
The bubble, yeah, we had all that. And so we found one of the findings is that our laws and the way we are organized suit themselves very well for tokenization and the token economy. And so we want to also put the Netherlands on the map and make sure that this is an opportunity for our businesses, but for society as a whole.
Yeah, and so maybe if you're watching from abroad, you think like, I'm here in the Netherlands, we're airing from Amsterdam, but I would say 2Tokens is not set up just for companies, etc. in the Netherlands, right? What is the geographical goal for 2Tokens?
So we work very closely with the International Token Standardization Association, which is a European initiative that started from Germany, which really starts at categorizing tokens and has a token database. Again, you'll hear more about that later today. Then we are co-founding associate member of the Interworking Alliance, the IWA, which has the token taxonomy framework. One of the things we're going to be doing with them, and they are based in the United States and in Asia, is that one of our use cases, the electronic bill of lading, is going to be an IWA use case, so that we can, internationalize that and start using it all over the world. Also, that's going to be one of the items we will see today. So we've actually accomplished a lot in the last year, and which is really interesting to see where this little project got us to.
And this is not the most deep question out there, but it is nice to introduce that people can ask questions. Please do so. We will treat as many questions as possible here in the studio. Your last question is coming from Jasper Jacobs. He asked, what is a token, or how do you define a token? Because I think some people understand something else with a token, right?
Well, that's an interesting question, and an interesting question that will also be answered by some other members of today's show. Because if you ask banks what a token is, they understand something different than you might think. But clearly, in terms of token economics and what 2Tokens think, tokens are used to transfer value between two individuals in a digital infrastructure. Which is a very broad definition.
Individuals or machines?
It could also be machines.
Or both.
No, and that's my background, machine to machine. If you look at, for instance, a smart grid, which is one interesting segment industry. If you want to start trading energy between a car and the grid, those are machines. And there you need tokens to do that, peer to peer.
Amazing. So thank you so much for organizing this, for spending all your time on this very important project. And we'll see you later on at the end as well.
I'll do the outro, and please enjoy, ask questions, and we would like everybody to join and partner up with us.
And where can they do that?
Go to 2tokens.org. You can sign up there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alex. Thanks. So we already had the first question rolling in. Of course, we would love for you to participate in all the sessions here. So just type in a question, and we'll bubble up the most important ones. Right now we have a poll, and I would like you to answer one of these questions. And the question is, what is your current role? Are you a researcher, developer? Are you a banker? The banker starts with a B, so vote B. Are you a regulator or a lawyer, an investor, or a civil servant? But there's also one thing, and that's, I think, my role. That's the F of entrepreneur. And you can vote now. Let's see. Votes are rolling in. Interesting to see. In the meantime, I have a new guest coming up next to me. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to show you the results right now. So these are the results. We have 42% investors. It doesn't say if they're what type of investors there are. If they are like me, then you buy some and you lose some, or you win some every now and then. But I presume that these are professional investors, and of course a lot of entrepreneurs in here as well. So great. That's actually, thank you so much for the poll. We're moving on to the second segment of today. We're going to talk about MiCA and standards. And next to me is Jelle Poel.
Hello, hello.
How are you doing, man?
Very well. How about you?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. So, Jelle, you are the co-founder and business lead at Dusk Network.
Correct.
And also the technology director at the 2Tokens Foundation. So you're wearing two hats here?
Wearing two hats. One hat is a little bit smaller than the other, but it's still on tonight.
Okay. Okay. So I won't dive in too deep, but can you explain in one sentence what Dusk Network is?
Yeah. So at Dusk Network, we're essentially building a blockchain for the European financial markets. And we use a lot of elements like privacy and confidentiality to really create a workable infrastructure for institutions, banks, exchanges, and platforms alike. Yeah.
So that's one hat, and the other hat?
Is technology director at the 2Tokens Foundation, which means that in the year running up to now, I've been involved from a technical perspective on a lot of the use cases, and this is also my role going forward. So I've been involved in a few tokenization cases, and now I'm working a lot on the central bank digital currency case, which I'm basically chaperoning technologically. Perfect.
I want to go through the program with you for tonight, actually. So as you can see, we have the local standards and the perspective on MiCA or MiCAR, if you want. After that, we're going to present the 2Tokens roadmap. We have a panel on tokenization and the COVID situation right now, and then the road ahead. And we end up with the future for the 2Tokens Foundation, where Alex is coming back.
Very bright.
Very bright. So this is you. And we're also having a guest, Stefan.
Yeah, with us is Stefan Schmitt, project manager at the ITSA, where he really focuses on two big projects, the ITIN and the ITC. So one is the token identification number, and the other is the token classification framework. They're actually adding a dimension to their framework on MiCA, which we'll briefly be discussing in a minute. And during his regular hours, he works at Block Daemon. Are you here with us, Stefan?
Yeah, I'm here. Jelle. Patrick, nice to be here. Hello to all the online audience. I'm looking forward to it.
Did I miss anything crucial?
No, I think you covered most. I believe, especially when it comes to what we do at the International Token Standardization Association, we will go in a little more detail anyways later on, we will discuss MiCA, classification, standardization, needs of it. And I think there we do some nice stuff. And so I'll talk about it once it's necessary and the start.
Okay, perfect. So during the sessions, we are indeed briefly going to touch and speak about MiCA. So we had a discussion, is it MiCA or MiCAR? So maybe that's the first question I need to ask you both. What is the right word to use here?
It's kind of both correct. So MiCA is the name of the regulation, the markets in crypto assets, and the R stands for regulation. So that's the market in crypto assets regulation, MiCAR. But I suppose the fully correct name would be MiCAR because it shows it's a regulation and not a directive, for example, which is more open to interpretation. This is law.
That's exciting stuff. But so why do we need this?
Yeah, so the main reason why this is being created now, so it's really a framework for the entire Eurozone that tries to capture all of crypto assets, but also crypto asset service providers or exchanges, anyone doing stuff on top of crypto and blockchain, basically. New projects coming up, and this kind of first big wave of European regulation is really there to kind of clean up the space. So it's not really aimed yet at the big projects that are doing well, that are already being good citizens, if you will. It's really aimed at kind of the more slightly shady section in the bottom of the market where there's things going on like insider trading or market abuse or misinforming potential investors. So this is stuff around, this is what your white paper should look like or has to contain, and really kind of more prescriptive stuff to, before we start regulating the existing big boys, we first kind of clean up the trash or the stuff that we would like to see a lot less of. So So that's that's what MiCA is right now.
And Stefan, what is the relevance of all these standards for you?
Well, for me personally, I cannot really tell, but what I can tell you about is I think generally for blockchain adoption and also for all the European startups, and I guess in that sense it affects you as well. I believe what is really, really necessary and has been for a long time is that we need established regulatory and legal certainty and harmonization on a European level, because we've seen Germany, Switzerland, Estonia, others approach regulation on a local level. And I think for a topic that is global, as soon as you go live on blockchain, it needs harmonization when it comes to regulation. And so I believe this MiCA approach will be really helpful for all of us. At least I hope that, because it fosters confidence in the market. It also shows that blockchain is not just a fluke. It's something that is considered also by the European Commission as one of the major trends, especially when it comes to finance. And so MiCA or MiCAR is really focused on stablecoins as well. On the other side, while these were all positives, I also believe that it's really important that they find a good balance between regulating the space and also making sure that innovation can still happen here, and that the entry hurdles for startups and really innovative use cases is not too high. And this is something I'm not quite sure about if they found the right measurement. I feel for some newer startups, it might be quite hard to really comply to the proposed regulation, and we will see how that impacts the space.
And so basically, you're saying kind of like at first, if you try to regulate it on a local level, local, national level, while the product is going global by definition, so you need to have it on, well, you're talking about European level now, but actually, shouldn't it be global legislation? I understand that it's very hard to get to, but do you see MiCA as a step towards a global legislation?
Well, it's really hard to tell, and as you said, I think achieving global regulation is extremely difficult and also time consuming. So even if it were to happen, I believe it will take a lot of time. What I think is quite positive for us and as a positive sign, when you think back of 2019, when Xi Jinping talked about the importance of blockchain in China, they are introducing their own CBDC. A lot of people were looking at China, but then again, I think Eastern CBDC has a really tough time here in the Western world, in Europe and the US. But I also believe that now all the eyes are looking at Europe. And I mean, it's, 160, 170 pages. The MiCA regulation proposal alone, we have a lot of news these days. We have the ECB saying they want to be prepared to issue their own CBDC. We have the digital strategy of the European Commission, and this is all part of it. And I believe a lot of people are watching closely what we are doing here in Europe at the moment. And I imagine that if we make it work, that a lot of people might adopt it. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of value immediately on the service side, right? So a lot of companies that are operating global are targeting European Union citizens. So that's one thing that they kind of want to start getting right. Mm-hmm. And then obviously the projects, they are more global. And that's also one of the areas that it might still be a little bit lacking in, because it's very difficult to see how these decentralized things might get regulated over time. But as Stefan said, it's a first step. It's not only utility tokens. So we've also seen that security tokens are under MiFID II. We kind of already knew that, but it's always good to get the confirmation. And especially the stablecoin space, so all kinds of digital cash basically. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the trickiest areas, but also an area where that really kicked stuff into gear, because the whole reason I think why we're seeing these pretty good timelines suddenly on a European level is because of what happened with Libra last year. So it was a big wake-up call here. There's global Facebook money coming your way, and now it's like, oh crap, this might actually happen. This looks like a really convenient payment method. Let's play some defense first, and now let's start playing some offense. So we're doing our own digital euro. We're proactively introducing regulation. So it's also them really getting back in the game.
So there's a question from the audience. So suppose that there will be a digital euro.
Yes.
Will MiCA then be the standard used for the implementation?
From a regulatory point of view, yes. So there's all kinds of design, right? Technological. Do we want everyday end users to be able to access it, or will it still go through banks? Or this is all still up in the air. But cash in its CBDC form will be, well, regulated under MiCA is not the right way of putting it, because it's central bank money. It is by definition its own thing. So a stable coin will fall under MiCA, or Libra will fall under MiCA. But of course, the European Central Bank is exempt from everything. So they just issue cash, and this has their own framework. And they've already said in the CBDC update last week that they plan to really develop CBDC as a digital version of a banknote, basically. So banknote is just a liability. It's a promise by the central bank that you can, via a certain route, knock on their door and get the cash. And they want this to be that, but digital. So that's already known.
Okay, cool. And so basically, if you look at now, the setup of MiCA is I like to reduce scams as well, regulate that market. You've touched on of course, other crypto or other security tokens and stable coins. Yeah. Stefan, would you say what is the biggest impact of MiCA in today's world?
That is a good question, which I think is really tough to answer. What I feel, as we were introduced, right? ITSA was founded in Germany, and I'm living here in Frankfurt as well. At least arguably the financial hub of Germany. And what we had at the beginning this year was tougher regulation on crypto asset service providers. I think this is the right word for it. In that case, mostly custody. And we saw a shift of interest from major banks and financial institutions that saw, all right, this asset class gets now a regulatory framework. We might want to take it seriously. We might want to be prepared to be engaged there in the future as well. And I think what we had on a German level now with MiCA is much broader on a European level, and therefore I believe we will see a lot of confidence going into the blockchain market as a whole. And as Jelle also said, and actually I'm coming from a different webinar, and we talked about Bitcoin in the past, saying that what happened 2018 after the ICO hype, that a lot of startups failed, I think was good because it was cleansing. A lot of scams got pushed out. The serious businesses stayed. And what you guys said, I think is true as well, because there's some hurdle to come over if you want to stay or build your business now on blockchain. I think a lot of the, let's say, not mature projects will drop out. It might be a hurdle for innovation, but I think it's also a big boost in confidence, and we need to make sure that not only big companies can participate, but startups as well. So as I said, balance, but I think it's a really positive signal overall.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you so much. I'm showing some of the conclusions that were shown earlier today also in your webinar. And maybe you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so we did the big deep dive this afternoon where we talked about MiCA, but also approached it from a use case perspective. So we talked about the European securities market, so about tokenizing assets, but also about tokenizing cash, because those are kind of the two big things that you need for big trades and adoption to happen. So we had the deep dive there that you can watch back. And And now this is really just going through it at a kind of breakneck pace. So we won't be going through all the conclusions. We've touched upon a lot of them, but I'll maybe zoom in a little bit on the last one. So that is kind of some of the hidden threats that we also see in MiCA. So Stefan already talked about that we don't want to stifle innovation, right? So some of these things might create some barriers for startups to go into. But we also see that some of the blockchain ecosystem, the way it exists today, might not be compliant or legal if it were to be started tomorrow, basically, or when MiCA is live. And this is very interesting because we might see some of the more decentralized protocols, etc., suddenly not being able to comply. And does that then mean that this global decentralized network needs to not operate in Europe, because that will become very difficult to enforce? And one of these examples is the travel rule that's mentioned there, which basically gives you all kinds of requirements that a transaction needs to fulfill, which many of today's biggest blockchain protocols do not fulfill to that letter, and was expected to not apply to protocols, but more on exchange level layer 2 stuff. But between the lines, you kind of see that they probably do expect that to apply. And then probably half of today's coins protocols are facing some challenges. Yeah.
To say it mildly.
Yeah.
So very briefly touching on the importance of the standards. So we've heard a lot of different words, MiCA, MiFID, ITSA, you name it. How do all these things tie together, and do we need so many frameworks?
Stefan, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So I believe you guys can see the next slide, right? Where we talk about a macro level between asset classes on a regulatory perspective and also on a practical perspective. I think we talked about MiCA enough now, and I told you why I think standards are really important for the whole blockchain scene. What we do, what also the Interwork Alliance does, which by the way, as 2Tokens, we are also members of, we create holistic standards that try to capture all the characteristics of tokens. We call it the International Token Classification Framework. And why do we do it? Because we think currently people buying and selling tokens, investing into projects, don't really have access to all the information they want. And so we create a framework to create more transparency and clarity on the markets. And I believe this is something we are lacking in this, let's say, new financial world, because as you guys are aware, when we talk about the traditional financial instruments, there's a lot of standardization, there's a lot of classification done. They have all the prospectus that we might see as a white paper now, according to MiCA as well. And so I think getting global market standards, what we're going for, is super important, so that all participants that want to invest in let's say digital assets, crypto assets, speak the same language and know exactly what their counterparty is talking about. And to quickly end it on your question, does it need 5 or 10 frameworks? Honestly, no. However, at least we don't want to make it a race. We also reached out, and this is why we are part of the International Work Alliance, because obviously we look closely at what the competition does or what others do, and we found out, hey, we have the same goal, creating standards for the token market classification frameworks, but their taxonomy framework, whilst having the same goal, goes at it from a totally different angle. And I think what needs to happen is that people join forces, trying to go for one standard, hopefully, that can be used globally. I think we all know this is impossible. Also from technical standards, there's also always so many, but no, we don't need 10 frameworks. I think 1, or if it has to be 2, would be enough.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stefan. Jelle, very quickly, what is the relevance of on a technical level?
Yeah, so on the technical...
Let me give you a time frame here. Got 60 seconds because we're running.
Okay, easy. Now, so on the technical level, this is about the implementation of all these things, right? So you have all these, like we said, big documents, 170 pages, but that's not how people work. And what you saw with utility tokens, the dominant standard was ERC20, and it's just how do we put the ones and the zeros in the right place so that we fit within all these big piles of paper, right? And now we see that also for the securities market. So that's, for example, where our company Dusk is doing work in the XSC space. We want to be that ERC20 equivalent, but then for financial instruments, so for securities. So that just means you have all these flavors, all these different toggles that you can use. If we start putting them in a kind of preset template, that allows you to tokenize a bond or a share. And that's really how standardization starts to work, interoperability. Yeah, the kind of same common language stuff that Stefan mentioned, but then tech-driven. Yeah.
Okay, so with that, I would like to thank you, Stefan, so much for calling in from Frankfurt. And
my pleasure.
Jelle, for joining us today.
Pleasure.
We're going to the audience. We're going to ask the second poll. And in the meantime, Jelle will swap places with the next guests. And also during the poll, I will leave as well, and I'll be replaced as well. So all thanks to COVID. So the poll is, it would be acceptable to make decentralized currencies without legal entities such as Bitcoin illegal, if it furthers the regulatory inclusion of crypto assets as a whole. Do you agree? Fully agree, actually, or disagree? Or disagree and say MiCA should be changed to allow for Bitcoin, etc. You can place your votes right now. And in the meantime, I'll switch and I'll leave the floor to Oliver and Mark.
Great to be here. I see the poll is still open, so please continue to keep on voting. I see a lot of votes coming in. That's always nice to see. And for the interest of time, because we're running a little late, and we have the assignment to shorten it as much as possible, which is always hard for us too, so be prepared. I'll stop the poll right now and I'll share the results with you. And 60% disagrees. MiCA should be changed to allow Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies in itself. Care to elaborate on that one or respond?
Let's just go straight into the 2 tokens discussion, because we, in the interest of time.
Sounds like a good plan.